Hi all, let's have a look at an interesting encounter from the Norway Blitz tournament. So this was prior to the main event. This is just for a rest day coverage game. So in this game, Sergey Karjakin was playing against Magnus Carlsen d4, and Magnus played the Dutch defense. So this really caught my interest. To play this in Blitz is very interesting. Knight f6 here, bishop g2, e6, so as if wanting to go into a Dutch Stonewall. Quite often, in fact, here the move c6 is played according to chess-based livebox c6. Now here d5, knight d2. This is slightly odd. Usually in this position, knight f3 and then c6. We see actually, even in this Blitz context, Magnus is picking up on a slight nuance here that d4 is slightly more vulnerable. So the question here is, can that be exploited in some way? We have bishop d6, knight h3, both sides castling, and now a very curious move. Usually in this position, there's like nearly 100 games with just c6. People are routinely playing c6 in this position. Apparently, Magnus Carlsen is the only one in livebook out of more than 100 people, because there's two that chose h6. The only person that's played knight c6 here. And you might think, well, wasn't there like a primary purpose of c6 to support d5? But if you look at this position, how easy is it to exploit d5 with that d file blocked? This is very interesting, because why is it the world champions is picking up and using the fact that this isn't necessarily an exploitable weakness when c6 isn't played? Everyone else is just routinely reinforcing it. Well, let's see. I mean, he provokes actually e3 for white defending there, so he's actually creating some light square weaknesses. And now, not only that, b6 is aiming to strike through those light square weaknesses and put now pressure on c4 and that diagonal. Yeah, there doesn't seem to be enough pressure on d5. You might think this knight's going to help put pressure on d5 soon. First white plays b3, and now we have a5, as if, again, light square pressure is building up. Bishop e2, bishop a6, light square pressure. With d5 vulnerable, knight f4 pouncing on both e6 and d5, but that's immediately snapped off. Doubling the pawns, knight e4. So we have a position where black hasn't committed that c-pawn yet. Is there a big advantage to this? d5 seems pretty solid and blocked, you know, shielded by the big knight on e4 here. So it seems a perfectly viable position. We have rook e1, rook e8, rook e3, queen d7, as though maybe a4 could be handy soon to try and undermine this structure. Knight takes is played, takes, and now f3. Another interesting decision now, d takes c4, leaves black in this position. It seems, you know, black is basically helping white undouble the pawns and leave this kind of isolated pawn on e6. Is there method in the madness here? And look, white has the bishop pair as well. Surely, at a superficial level, you might think, what's going on here? The thing is here, look at that knight. It's actually putting a lot of pressure now on d4. I'm not sure the routine queen takes b3 is possible, unfortunately for white. So this causes a concession now for white to do with d4. Let's have a quick look at this. Queen takes b3. Yeah, I think black can just play knight takes d4 here, hitting the queen. Something like this. Instead of this, which gives white a big edge, to say the least, there's a move here, a4 in this variation. And say queen c3, we can play c5. Yeah, or we can just play c5 immediately, you might think. although bishop takes, the problem is bishop takes and queen takes. So technically, I think the technical recommendation here in this position. I mean, it looks like a nasty self pin. In general, in Blitz, you don't want to go into self pins, but there seems to be this A4 here. So whatever way this if takes, we just take there. So the queen's moving off b6. If here we play knight e2 check, the queen's not protecting d1. So that tactic, we just take on d1 there. So yeah, a4 is actually important here. And then either c5 or e5. Even e5 is possible. This position, knight e2 check. Yeah, because e5 actually blocks the diagonal, so black's not getting mated if he tries knight e2 check here. Otherwise, there's a sting in the tell. Yeah, we can't take on d1 because of g7. So there's ingenious resources behind the scenes here in this position, actually. I know this is a Blitz game, but it was actually with increments. They might have thought about some of these variations a bit. So white actually played d5 now. So this knight's causing a bit of trouble and mayhem on c6, putting pressure on white's centre. E takes d5, queen takes, and now this move a4 here, knowing that the queen can't take there because of this pin on e3. So queen takes is a disaster because of rook takes e3 there. Okay, so where does the queen want to go? Well, there are not too many options actually. Queen took on a4. I mean, let's have a look. If queen c2, knight b4 with tempo, and then d4, this is possible. That's a nasty pin, and this one is going to lead to a nasty fork, a family fork. Oh dear, oh dear. So yeah, what can white do here? This leads to a fork. Well, it's unpleasantness. Even though there's queen d2, this is just unpleasant. Again, this is an unpleasant position. So basically, white seems to go in with what seems to be a risky continuation, because it enables black now to get rid of white's bishop pair with this tactical move bishop f1, and at the same time as getting rid of the bishop pair, weaken the light squares around that previously that fianchetto bishop. So bishop takes here. Now knight a5 threatens knight c4. This has all of a sudden become very, very unpleasant. There is a slight trap here. Knight c4, we can play rook takes c4 with white, I believe. So we have d4, sensible. E5. And now a nice move. Can you see what black plays in this position? If I give you 5 seconds, starting from now. And I wonder if this is the top technical move. I think it's one of the top technical moves as well, actually, that's played. It's really cute. Black to play. You might want to pause the video. Okay, knight c4. Now it's not a misprint or anything. If rook takes, then there's queen d5 check. Yeah, so this light square campaign is yielding light square tactics now. You know, the weakened squares around the king are really being tapped into. c5 blunting the bishop. White's position without the bishop pair now seems a bit impotent. So okay, rook e6 now threatens rook h6 check. This is now taken for d3, threatening d2. Yeah, this pawn's really dangerous. d2, and now a nasty pin, rook d3. Now here you might think it's lost for white, and it is lost for white. White tries f5 after rook takes e5. The game ended here. It's totally lost. If bishop f4, which might be the best move under the circumstance, we just take there and then take here, piece up, thanks very much, c4, end of game. It's pretty over here, yeah, where the game ended on rook takes e5. Okay, it's only a Blitz game, you might say, and I shouldn't be analysing Blitz games in detail, but there seems to be some finesse to this Blitz game, and I believe it was with increment. And in particular, you know, knight c6. Why aren't people considering knight c6? Is Magnus the only one thinking? You know, knight d2 was an interruption, a self-interruption of of that D file, and knight c6 as a precursor to exchanging off on f4 to make sure d5 is left protected, as a precursor then to weakening the light squares in general. It's fairly brilliant and logical play, ruthless on the light squares throughout this game. In fact, I hope you enjoyed it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.